Good morning, everybody. Welcome to SQL City Streamed. It's going to be 2 a.m. when you're watching this, so I am not awake. I am pre-recorded. So get some popcorn. Unfortunately, can't ask questions, but you can call Andrew. Oh no, I'm just kidding, Andrew. You can email me, and I will be happy to answer questions. So my name is Stuewe, and I'm a senior database developer. Locally, I'm not a consultant and I don't work for Redgate, although that wouldn't be a bad thing. That would be awesome. I do call myself a Redgate nerd because if you get me in person, I won't shut up about them. So let's look at the objectives of this session. We're going to talk about why you want to version your SQL objects, and then we're going to start talking about how SQL source control can help you version your objects. We're going to go through a whole bunch of demos because that's the best way to see the product. So the benefits of backing up and making copies of your SQL objects and putting them in a repository helps in various ways. One, if you're a company that requires to make various entities to pass compliance or you have to be audited, by putting your SQL objects in a repository, it makes the auditors very happy. You also have backup copies. So if you didn't know your database was corrupt and your backup is no longer valid, that is a very bad thing, but you could go back and get your objects out of the repository. One thing that I did have to do, I had something that was in production and we needed an older copy. So we could go back and get an older copy out of the repository without having to install a backup, or we may not have that version in an older backup. Some of the other things that you can do, let's see. You can know exactly which objects can change from the last check-in. Now we're going to see how SQL Source can make that even easier for you. And you'll have an audit history. And again, that goes back to helping the auditors for any compliance that you need, because it'll say Andrew did something, Jake did something, and then Mickey went behind and messed it up. So that would be some of the benefits. Now, how does SQL Source Control get all of your objects into the repository? Well, it's like a bridge. It is not a repository. It's going to get your SQL objects from SQL Server, and then it's going to move them into your various repositories that you have. Now, SQL Source Control does support all of them, but some of them it's only in script files. So depending on which products that you have, and we'll see the list that they have set up and work really nicely for you in a few minutes. So let's take a look at the SQL Source Control benefits that I have bulleted here. Look at the second one. This is one of my favorites. You can version data. I really like this feature when I'm working in development and I want to give all the developers the lookup values, and then I might have to change them. By putting them in the repository, I don't have to constantly personally go update all their databases or send them scripts. It's already being versioned for me. Some of the other things we can do is we can create what's called a migration script. And this is where it gets more complicated. And I have a demo of this. This would be an example of adding a new column that is not nullable. So you need to be able to initially put it as nullable, put the data in it, and then make it not nullable. Now, Redgate, the way they write their scripts for deployments, is actually easier than that, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. You can also roll back your changes. So I made some changes and I didn't mean to. What Jake did was accurate. So what I can do is I can, without checking anything in, I can go ahead and roll it back, which is really nice. They will point out areas where you can merge code, and you can also participate in continuous integration. Now, I won't be demonstrating continuous integration, but there are wonderful videos out there, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be some presentations that you could look up in SQL in the City Streamed on the topic. Look, one of the things that's my favorite. Git is now supported. Now, it's been supported for probably 8 months, maybe longer, but It wasn't before that, and it was painful for me, and it was painful for me to teach my team. So I'm so excited that they're now supporting Git. Did I mention Git is supported? Because I'm kind of excited about that. Now, what are some of the other things that you can do? A lot of teams, not only are they using SQL source control and repositories, they're also using applications to keep track of work items. For instance, if you're using Team Foundation Server by Microsoft, known as TFS, it has a repository and it has a ticketing system, and you can use them together. Subversion, you might be using another ticketing system with that one. I don't remember what it is. And then Git, you might be using maybe Jira, which is made by Atlassian, which is an Australian company. Now I'm going to show you where you would put this, but you can put the Jira URL ticket for Subversion and TFS. You can put the work item numbers, and it'll tie them directly to those work items. So now you know exactly what changes went with the work items, and that is really nice. And my boss really likes that, and the app dev team lead likes that. Now, if you are one of those people who like to use Visual Studio, that used to be me, I'm now an SSMS person, you can do some of this in Visual Studio. I don't like to do that, and I won't be presenting on it today, but it is possible, which is really nice because I hate doing check-ins and check-outs in Visual Studio. To me, it's a pain. I'm going to show you how you can filter objects out. For instance, I'm working really closely with one of my app dev persons and people, and what she wants to do is do some experimentation with tables and views, but I don't want them to go into the repository, and I don't want somebody who's not paying attention to check them in for her. So we created a schema for her called TMP, and anything she makes in there is not going to go in the repository. So I'm able to create a filter to ignore anything in that schema, which makes it really nice. So we'll see how to do that. We can also filter out various aspects that are part of the normal SQL object syntax. This is even better. For instance, you don't want to ever send replication syntax, or you never want to send no check syntax. You can tell SQL source control to ignore those pieces of syntax, and they won't go into the repository. Now, what's really cool is these same features are available in SQL Compare, and that way you can also do it from that end if you are comparing a database to your repository, to a backup, or to another database. Oh, did I mention Git is supported? Anyone? So now let's take a look at a whole bunch of demos. The first one we're going to go through is how do you connect your repository to SQL source control in SSMS. Now, as you know, I like Git, so I will be using Git as my back end. I have a couple different databases here that I'll be using. AWMonkey RG1, and then we're going to pretend AWMonkey RG2 belongs to Jake. Now, if you don't know Jake, he's one of the wonderful Redgaters, and he's sitting in the audience, and I'm going to pick on him all day, or at least for an hour, and then he can pick on me. So, one of the things you can note right away is that AWMonkey RG2 is already connected to SQL source control. And I can see that because it's green and it has a gray dot, ball. And I'll tell you about what the ball represents in a few minutes. So on AWMonkey RG1, it's not connected. So let's take a look at how to connect it. Now, if you've never used Redgate tools, and this is your first time, they've created a nice toolbar up at the top. And SQL source control is one of the items in the toolbar. On the setup screen, we're going to go ahead and link it to my database. And I have various options on this screen and in the next screen. Now, if you're just doing a POC and maybe you haven't even picked what versioning repository you're going to use, use Git, then go ahead and try the just let me try it out. It'll put a Subversion repository on your system, and that way you can check things in and out without having to go through and set up the whole kit and caboodle. And if you're from another country and you don't know what that means, it just means everything. So I'm going to go ahead and link it to my source control system. They have Git, Subversion, TFS, and Vault. I can't say this one. Mercurial is another one that people have connected through here. Now finally, I'm going to select my database folder. So Git and Subversion both have local folder systems. Those are your local copies you're working with. Then you have somewhere else, either on the cloud or on one of your servers, the repository that is the communal repository that everybody is getting, committing and getting latest from. So we're going to go and point to our local repository. And I put that on the C drive, Git repository, AWMonkey, and I believe I have it on this one, Redgate session 1, and I'm going to go ahead and link it. Now, for me, the first time I'm working with SQL source control, I like seeing all these dialog boxes, but then I didn't want them anymore. So you can click close the dialog box for completion, and then you don't have to see it anymore. Now I'm going to verify I have the same one. Yes, that's very good. So now my repository and my database are both linked. Now let's take a look at some of the options that you have on here. They have some various checkboxes that you can use. This is the one that turns on and off whether you see the dialog boxes, which I just spoke about. You can also have the ability to have the SQL source control application running in multiple SSMS windows, and that's this tab here. Now, if you're like me, I will quite commonly have 3 or 4 open. I'll have one for my environment, I have one for prod, so that I don't accidentally start developing in it. And then I have one for the application developer's environment because sometimes they need me to do work in there as well. And then I'm not confusing everything. So I will turn on this feature so that if I do need to check stuff in and out of the application developers databases, I can, because sometimes I'm updating them for them. Let's see, this next one tells you how often it's going to update. They do have refreshes on the various screens, so I actually never change that. And then check for changes in static data. And I'll talk about the static data in a minute. Briefly, that is the data you can check in and out of the repository. Now here's where the fun comes in. Comparison options is actually a link, and what this will do is it will affect your behavior. Remember me talking about not wanting to check in no check? Then I scrolled all the way down to the bottom and I can say ignore with no check, and now that statement will never get logged in, checked into the repository. Some people don't care if there's extra white space. If one person puts 3 lines of empty lines and someone puts none, that'll ignore that and it won't be seen as a change. User properties, I personally don't keep any of my user properties or roles in the database. I like to do all of that in production. So I usually say to ignore this one. Now I kind of scrolled fast up here. Let me start at the top. At the top is behaviors, so this could be a true or false checkbox. And at towards the bottom we have ignore. So these are all the things you want to ignore. For those of you using replication, this was a really good one to see. Ignore replication triggers. That way you're not getting all that information into the database if you don't care about that. So these are various database comparisons that you can have. Now what about filters? I talked about not wanting to put in the repository any schemas with TMP. So what I can do is I can go ahead and set up some filters. So if I come down here to my schema objects, I can click on it and then say exclude if the object name equals TMP and hit and save and close, and it'll ignore any schema objects that have TMP as the beginning of the name. So let's take a look. Those are some options you can set up. Well, what if Jake has different options? And I want to make sure that we're using the exact same options. You check those in just like any other file. So when I go to get latest, remember this is the first time I'm attaching to an existing database. So here I have my database comparison options, and it's what Jake wanted, which is always a good thing. So now with database comparison options, you can only check that one file in. You can't check anything else in. So I'm going to hit apply changes. Okay. Now we still have the filter file, and we can even see down here, if I click on it, it has all the different changes. And let's see if there's any that are different. Here, schema. Here's the one that I changed, and this is the one that Jake had. So now look at this section right here. Keep mine or take theirs. What does that mean? Well, because it was an existing database, and the timestamps that are in that repository are different than anything or some objects that I have in my database for changes, it doesn't know which ones to take. So it's giving you the option. It's saying, do I want to keep my changes or do I want to take what was in the repository? So since I just made this TMP change, and when I'm looking at all the changes, that's the only one. Oh, here's another one, exclude all. Well, maybe I should keep his. So I'm going to go ahead and say take theirs. Now if you notice, there is a merge button right here. Now some objects will allow you to compare items row by row, but not all of them. And if I click on it, it's going to say only stored procedures can be merged, since this is this is not a stored procedure. So I'm going to have to take one side and then modify it. Now what's really something you got to think about and not freak out like I do every time I connect a database. If you're filtering out a whole bunch of stuff, you may get a whole long list if some of those items you ignore are already in your repository. For instance, users. We have some users in our repository even though I'm not really keeping track of it. So I'll get this long list here even though I don't want it. And after I check in the database comparison file and this filter file, they all go away because I told SQL Source Control I didn't care about it. So now I'm down to one table. Let's take a look at this. What exactly did I change in here? Oh, hey, I got a new column on this side, but it doesn't exist in the repository. Well, since that's for a future demo for us, I'm going to say I don't want it. So I said take theirs. It says take here's for your change type, and I'm going to apply my changes. It says, hey, you're about to delete a column. Is that okay? Yes, yes it is. Always. Someone made the comment always. All right, so right now, hey, I'm looking pretty good. At least here on this side, it looks like I matched the repository. So this is where I'm getting everything from the repository. Well, what if there's something in my database that didn't exist in the repository? Then you go to the commit tab. It's checking. Ah, it matches too. All right, my database matches the repository, so I'm really happy. So now let's take a look what's next on my slide deck. Oops, that was the wrong button. We talked a little bit already about configurations and SQL object filters. This was the database options and the filter selection as well. So now let's talk about checking SQL objects in and out, and that you can put comments. So we're going to play with the first monkey, and I'm going to open up a query window. And I'm going to grab some code that I've already created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter that table and I'm going to create a new column, but I really want it not null. But as you know, you can't create a not null column if there's data in the table. So we're going to create a nullable. I just executed that. I'm going to populate it with my awesome number 3 value. I'm going to execute that. Hey, what's this? Oh, I also have SQL prompt on here. So you may want to go to a SQL prompt session. They have this awesome box that says, hey, wait a minute, you're going to change the entire table. Wow. All right, this is a wonderful thing if you forget you're in production. Yes, today, right now, it's okay. So whoever's teaching SQL prompt class, you are welcome for the lead-in. So now I'm going to make it a not null column, and I'm going to execute that. Wonderful. So now let's go back to our Objects Explorer. Hey, if you take a look, right here, you can see that that gray ball is now blue, and I can see on my table folder, it also has a blue dot. That's telling me that there's something that's changed in there. I love that, because otherwise you have no idea. You got to go through file by file, or you got to try and keep track on a piece of paper. Yes, I've been there, I've done that, got the t-shirt. So here, I've opened up the tables and I can see that I changed the customer table. And now I can see down here, I have my new column. So wonderful. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and check this in. Where there's nothing here. What's going on? The time hasn't elapsed yet for refreshing. So I can click on the refresh. Just means I was coding faster today. And now I can see that there is a customer change. Now this particular table, checking it in is for one of my other demos. So I'm actually going to make another change, and then we can see how that gets checked in. So let's go back to a query window, and I'm going to create a procedure called awesome proc, and it's going to select the number 1. Amazing proc, I know. So now I have a new store procedure, and as you can see, it hasn't updated yet. Let's see if we refresh this. Nope. But if we come over here, we can hit refresh. Oh, there, it popped up. So just take a little time, but usually we're making a whole bunch of changes and then checking it in, so it's okay. So now when I click on programmability, it shows me that I also have my awesome proc to change. And when I click on it, I'll see down here that on the left I have the new proc, and it's going to get checked into the source control. Now one of the other things that I like is it tells me who changed it. I'm logged in as administrator. This is really nice when various people like Jake might have some and Andrew might have some when we're in a shared environment and you don't want to check somebody else's work in because it might be a work in progress. Now you might sometimes see unknown. That can occur for various reasons. One of the reasons is you had changes that weren't in the repository and you connected SQL source control to your database. it doesn't know who made the change. So it says unknown. So you just need to take a look and see what's up with those. Okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and only check in awesome proc. So now here I can put my comments. Hi Jake. I made a proc for you. Proc for you. Now you can go ahead and look at the documentation. If you look at my earlier slide, I had a link that will show you exactly what the syntax is here for connecting to a work item in Team Foundation, Subversion, or products like Jira when you're using Git. When I hit commit, yay, everything went fine. Close automatically. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it checked it in. Wait, with Git, there's always another step. It's a two-step process, even if you're working with C# code. So they introduce the ability to push the code from your local repository up to the communal repository without leaving SQL source control. I'm very happy about this because this is what tripped up my team who didn't understand the whole process. And so this made my life much easier as well as theirs. So now when I hit push, it's going to tell me it's going to push everything up to the repository and hit continue, and it's going to go ahead and do that for me. Now if you use branching, which is creating two copies in your communal area and having the ability to move on, certain check-ins back and forth, that you can't do from here. But you can merge down and merge up between the communal repository and the local repository. Great, now we just have the one change in here. Now what about Jake's? We're pretending this one is by Jake. We're going to go to get latest, and he's going to say, hey, is there anything new? Hey, look at that, Mickey made my proc for me. I can see what it is. Now, for me, this already showed up. That's because I'm working right now with a local repository that's connected on the same system. If it wasn't, I would use this button here, pull from remote repository. Again, this is for Git. Click on it. It'll go and pull all the changes that are in your branch up in the communal repository to a local copy. When you have it, you can go ahead and hit apply changes, and it'll apply it to your database. So now let's take a look at how we're able to check data in as well. And this is really good for lookup tables. If you have, say, 100,000 rows, you're not really going to want to do that because every time it goes to compare if anything has changed, it's going to check the 100,000 rows. I tried it, was not happy, had to unlink it. And I'll show you how to unlink it in case you try it just to see if you're able to do it. So let's go back to SSMS. I'm going to look at my wonderful table here called test, and I'm going to look at the data. Now I have some wonderful lookup data in here that all it is numbers. And I want to put this into SQL source control because Jake really needs it for his project. So I'm going to right click on test. I'm going to go to other SQL source control tasks, link and unlink static data. Now this is going to show me all the tables that I can use. I want to use test, so I'm going to check it. Now if there were already tables linked, they would show in here as checked. So I'm going to hit save and close. And then I'm going to go back to my SQL source control tab. It's already put it on the list of things to check in, and it has marked them all as inserts. Now the way SQL source control works is it puts all data as inserts and it puts all SQL objects as create objects. Now it will then change them to alter or drop or create new, whatever it needs when it comes time to update a database with the changes. So I'm going to go ahead and put new lookup data in the comments because we always want to put good comments. and hit commit. So this has committed the data. It puts it into our repository. Because we're using Git, we're going to go ahead and push it up to the communal repository. Now I'm going to pretend I'm Jake, except for my hair's longer. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the test data. Whoa, what happened? Ah, he already had some data in there, but I have an additional row. What do I want to do? Well, he needs that extra row, so we're going to go ahead and say take theirs. And then I'm going to hit, sorry, I looked at my clock. I hit take theirs, which means I need to go back to the Get Latest tab and hit Apply Changes. So now when I go to his database, and I do select star from test, I now have row number 4 that has 4, 5, very important values. Now we're ready to deploy. Oh, I forgot to tell you, usually I use this technique during development. I personally like to keep track of all new lookup values in production. So I don't want to maintain what's in production and what's in development. So I usually unhook all the lookup table data after that set of new lookup tables has made it to production. And sometimes I don't do that. It kind of depends on what's going on. So I'm going to be Jake, and I'm going to go to the tables, right-click on Test, go to Other SQL Source Tasks, Link and Unlink Static Data, and I'm going to tell it I don't want to watch this one anymore. So now when you go to the Commit tab, it'll show that it's a data unlink. And so this is going to remove it from the repository. Data not needed anymore. Sorry to yell. I'm going to go ahead and push it up to my communal repository. And now when I go to mine, and I go to Get Latest, again, remember I'm 2 people on one machine. If I was on 2 different machines, I would pull from the repository. But only for Git. The push and the pull are only for Git. And here I can again see data unlink, and I can apply the changes. Now the data in those tables will not be kept in sync through SQL Source Control any longer. So let's go look at what's next up to be demoed. Oh, empty databases. Okay, this is really cool. I did do it kind of, well, I consider it a big database because we're a small shop. But it would be considered a small database by some people. And I tried it, and it was really awesome. What am I talking about? I connected SQL Source Control to an empty database and pulled all the objects from SQL Source Control into the empty database, and it gave me everything. See the smile? Yeah, very happy. So let's take a look at that. So here I have an empty database. It's not connected. So I'm going to go to Setup, link my source control like we saw at the beginning, Git, go to my folder, Redgate session, OK, link, Get Latest. I have my database comparison options. Great. Now they're going to be in sync with all the other databases connected to this repository. Filter. Okay, let me show you some things. Now, right now, everything is new and everything's hunky-dory. But what if you come into the screen and there's some conflicts that we saw earlier? Or maybe I only want to update only one. For instance, I only want to update this filter or apply this filter. I can click on one row, hold the Shift key down, click on the last row, and uncheck or check, depending on the behavior I want. Now, after you do that, you need to what I call click off. So that goes back down to one line. So I still have 17 out of 32 objects that will be committed right now. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the others. And I'm going to go up to the top and only check in the filter. Oh no, what happened? Something bad happened. Not quite sure what. So I'm going to go, and I have the ability to deploy the script manually. So if I hit manually edit the script and hit OK, this is the entire script it was trying to insert. It's got everything, the table creations, definitions. One of the things that I love is it's using commit and rollback. So at the very top there's a begin transaction. Up here it's using transaction, isolation level serializable, and begin transaction. Now what does that mean? Because this isn't data. What that means is if it's trying to apply table changes and store procedure changes and something bad happened, it rolls them all back. Yay! This is really nice when you have a script you weren't expecting in production and it fails. You don't have to worry about being left in a halfway state. Right there, that's just amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And as all SQL scripts, it comes and tells me there's an issue right here with the database name. All right. So I'm going to go and find that. Oh, well, I'm going to copy that. And what it is there's a user name here. Copy. Find. There it is. And it didn't get translated. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. How can I prevent that if I happen to see this particular issue? In the setup, comparison options, uncheck add database use statement. Now that was already being wrapped up in there somewhere, but I found that that helps control that issue. So now when I run it, let's see if it got them all. Yay, everything else was successful. So what does that mean? That means I have a table called customer. I bet you anything, I had only one selected. Yep. And there's a conflict on that one because there's a new column in mine. I bet you I had that one table in there, or it might have been from that script. So I'm going to say take theirs, and I'm going to apply everything. Let's see what happens. It's telling me that there's some logins that are corrupt. That's because it's trying to create users, which I didn't really want. So let me go back and tell you how to fix that. I hit cancel. It's because my filter says to ignore users, and I didn't apply my filter yet. So I'm going to select them all and uncheck. I'm going to go and apply only the filter. Now yes, I just made this mistake, but this is something I have to walk through my team with as well. And if I go all the way down at the bottom, I no longer have Victoria, if you saw that earlier. You can also click on these headers and it will sort by the various objects. I can also sort based on type, and I can see I no longer have a user for a type. So now I'm going to go ahead and apply all the changes. It's just talking about the customer table and changing the number of columns. Voila, look at that. I have all new tables in here that weren't in there before. And I have some store procedures that weren't in there before. I have just populated an empty database with an entire database schema. When would I want to do that? Maybe I want to just do some schema comparisons without any data. Maybe I want to start from the brand new database to start populating it with test data without deleting data from another database. All right, let's see what's next on my list. Hey, I skipped one. Why don't we go back and look at that? Uh-oh, you saw my fun slide. And it started all over. No, we're not going to start at the beginning. So since I missed the slide, we can see that I have it on my objectives. Once I put it up there, migration scripts. Let's take a look at that. What is a migration script? A migration script allows you to put something in more complicated. Remember my customer table? If I look at the commit, it has a new column that's not null, and it's going to try putting that in, and as we talked about earlier, that's going to fail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, yes, I want to commit that. And it's saying, hey, Mickey, you may want to create a migration script. Why, yes, that sounds like a wonderful thing to do. I'm going to hit Add Migration Script, and it's going to take me to another window. What if I don't get this message, and I know that I want to put data in the table or customize the script? I can also go to the Migrations tab, and it will list any objects that need to be committed. I can select the ones I'm interested in. Can also search for them, which is kind of nice. I can hit Generate Script. It's going to create what it already knows, which in here, it's going to, let's see here, it's going to remove the primary key from the existing table. It's going to create a temporary table representing customer. It's going to insert any data that it already has. It's going to drop the original table, and then it's going to rename the new table to the old table's name, and finally recreate the primary key. Now what that allows you to do is it's going to allow you to modify the insert statement or maybe put some additional code in here. So again, I'm going to use SQL prompt because I can. Shift Control Y. It's going to, it helps if you do it correctly. Control KY. It formatted my insert statement, so now I can look at it a little easier. And I can see that my new column is not here. So I'm going to add new column, and my default value was 3. Why did I add that here? Because in the original customer table, it didn't have that column. That's what we're adding. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add it to the temporary table that will be renamed. I can give it whatever name I want on the migration script. Hit Save and Close, and it's now added to my commit window in lieu of the customer table. So now I see I have a new migration script. It includes the customer table, and it has everything that we are doing. And there's my insert script with my number 3. So now I can commit it. Migration script extraordinaire. I can't spell. My best language is SQL. That's just the way it is. My spelling is so bad, I have a spell checker in my data modeling tool. That's just the way I roll. Because you know, code works as long as you're consistent with your naming. So if you spell it wrong the whole time, it works. So now let's go back to our first database and go to Get Latest. Is that where I made the change? That's probably where I made the change. There it is. We're going to Jake's database because apparently I made the change, and I can see the migration script here. And when I apply it, it's going, hey, you're going to add a new table, column, yep. And it was successful. So now when I go to New Query, and I do select star from customer, where'd all my data go? There was, I guess the table was empty on one side. Well, that means nothing went in because there was nothing in the table in the first place. So you'll have to trust me. Now, what if Jake didn't have any data, but Andrew did, who's also working on it? Then that script would have added 3 to all his data. So I didn't do the migration script for nothing. There's still use in it. Just Jake emptied his table for some reason. Jake, we got to work on that. You know, the best database, the fastest database is the one with no data. Yes, that's very true. Okay, let's take a look at what we have next. And that is the objectives. All right, we talked about why you want to have SQL source control in the first place. Sorry, I said that wrong. Why you want to have a repository in the first place. A repository is separate from SQL source control. SQL source control is the bridge. Okay. Then, oh, by the way, okay, side note, completely irrelevant. That girl going over from one side to the other totally reminds me of Monty Python. Okay, just had to add that in. Very important tidbit. So, now that you have that in vision, SQL source control is like trusting and going across that bridge that doesn't exist. And then we went through a whole bunch of demos showing how SQL source control can make your life easier for moving your objects from SSMS into the repository. Use Git. Git is free, so I'm not publicizing anything that you have to pay for. Anything to use with Git does, but that's okay. So we do have a few minutes. Unfortunately, I can't take your questions right now, but I'm going to show you two cool things. So don't tell anybody that I'm showing you this. This is super secret stuff. I'm going to show you a very exciting screen about SQL source control. Is that an exciting screen or what? When you do have to call, and hopefully you don't, have to call tech support, they're going to ask you what version. So this is where you can find your version. Now, if you click on feedback right here, it's going to take you to this page. And what this is the user voice page. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to vote for ideas that people have on any of their products. Right now, I'm doing SQL source control, so you can vote for how many you want, and everybody's given something. Wait, what's going on in the background? Ha! When you get bored or you're waiting for someone to give you something, you can play asteroids. Oh yes. There you go. How's that for ending? This is an Easter egg that you find from the help screen. Don't tell anyone. I won't tell your boss. Gotta show the fun stuff. Redgate's fun, but you gotta show the other super secret stuff. So that is all the topics for today for SQL source control. You can find my presentation on my website, but you can also find it on the website for SQL in the City streamed. The presentation will be there as well as the recordings after they've been finalized. If you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email. If you follow me on Twitter, I talk about things other than SQL, like my dog, my kids, and various other topics. You should try and get involved in your local community where you can hear not only about Redgate tools, but other items in the SQL environment. And this link, if you download the slide deck, will take you to the page that will allow you to give SQL source control a trial. When you download it, it is a full version, so you can try it out for, I believe, 2 weeks, and then you'll fall in love with it. Again, it'll put a Subversion repository locally if you want to just try it out without connecting it to your real repository. So thank you very much for watching me. You can think of me right now because I'm sleeping since it's 3 a.m. now. So have a great day.